Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm doing a redraft specific video. It could somewhat apply to Dynasty, but you don't want to make such drastic moves in Dynasty because obviously you hold these guys for the entirety of their careers if you wish, or you can trade them, buy other quarterbacks, so on and so forth. But I'm going to be comparing points per game, strength of schedule, put them together, and then try to assess as to which quarterbacks we should be looking to buy, hold, sell high on, cut entirely. It's contingent on the player themselves, right? So by the end of this video, you should have a pretty good idea as to how players have been performing in terms of their points per game through 10 weeks so far, an idea of how easy or difficult their strength of schedule is in weeks 15 through 17, the actual fantasy playoffs, and then based on kind of these two factors put together, what we should be doing with these quarterbacks. And so as you can see here, I've sorted the quarterbacks and used conditional formatting to kind of give you an idea about tier breaks in terms of how the quarterbacks are scoring, highest to lowest. So at the top, we have Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, and arguably Lamar Jackson, kind of in a trio tier up there. You have Jalen Hurts, Drake May, Justin Herbert, Matthew Stafford, kind of in their own little mini tier, in my opinion. Then, you have kind of Caleb Williams, Daniel Jones, and then arguably Bo Nix, Dak Prescott, and Brock Purdy kind of in a tier. And then, Jaden Daniels, Mayfield, Goff, Dart, and Love, and then so on and so forth towards the bottom. A lot of these guys, we already know that they're performing well, so this shouldn't be a surprise to most of you. A couple things I want to mention. Joe Flacco, as of me making this video, has just returned to practice, which would open up his 21-day window to return. So I have Flacco's points per game because, he's played since he took over for Browning. He's played a couple games now, and I don't really want to put Burrow's points per game there because it was like 8 points per game, and obviously that's skewed because he's much more talented and wasn't able to finish a game, right? So that definitely hurt his stats. But as you can see, there are some quarterbacks that we should be generally avoiding if we take a look at their points per game from weeks 1 through 10. Those would primarily be, your Penix, Brissett's, Tua's, Geno, Young, Mariota, Gabriel, Ward, and Shuck. And I would maybe take Brissett out of that because he's definitely been a fine quarterback and a pretty good streamer as of recently. And so once again, this is how things are shaping up through 10 weeks, but let's take a look at the strength of schedule in the fantasy playoffs to see who has a better or worse likelihood of performing well, at least in the sense of their matchups for us. Whether or not they're able to overcome them is a different story. And so now I have the strength of schedule sorted by team and quarterback that goes with said team. Once again, I use conditional formatting here. So green or a positive percentage means good, and red or a negative percentage means bad, right? And so quarterbacks that I would tier as this is a seriously advantageous playoff matchup or multiple matchups, and I would be looking to potentially roster players like this. Would be Tua Tagovailoa, JJ McCarthy, Dylan Gabriel. Now, Jaden Daniels and Marcus Mariota, I have them split out separately. It's kind of in the air as to whether Jaden Daniels is going to come back. I personally think it's a bit of a lost season and they should probably play it safe with their franchise quarterback, but far be it from me to make those decisions for them. But I do have them separately. Then I have Lamar Jackson, Jared Goff, and Joe Flacco / Joe Burrow in that last part of this tier, in my opinion. They did just, once again, open up the practice window for Joe Burrow, so he potentially should be back here soon. But those are players that have a distinctly advantageous strength of schedule in weeks 15 through 17. Players who I think are, a little bit positive, but I don't think it's such an advantageous schedule to where you should just be seriously considering, just dropping really good players for them, or just, dropping them altogether per se, or maybe even necessarily targeting them. I'll get to the decision where I combine both of the points per game so far and strength of schedule together to kind of have an assessment, a detailed, thorough assessment as to what we should be doing in a little bit. But once again, players that I think it's a somewhat advantageous schedule, but nothing crazy, would be Brock Purdy, Daniel Jones, Jordan Love, Drake May, Jackson Dart, and Justin Fields. Then kind of in the next tier, quarterbacks that it's potentially a little bit advantageous, but also a little bit, disadvantageous would be players like Aaron Rodgers, Bo Nix, Dak Prescott, Caleb Williams, Trevor Lawrence, Jalen Hurts, and Sam Darnold. Quarterbacks that I would potentially worry about a little bit based on their strengths of schedule only, not the individual player in and of themselves, would be somebody like, Justin Herbert, Bryce Young, Michael Penix, Tyler Shuck. Quarterbacks that it is pretty brutal, but not otherworldly terrible in terms of the schedule itself. You have your Josh Allens, Matthew Stafford, Baker Mayfields, Cam Wards, and CJ Strouds. But then quarterbacks that their strength of schedule is ludicrously bad would be somebody like Jacoby Brissett, Geno Smith, and especially Patrick Mahomes. That is absolutely brutal. But once again, obviously you're not going to drop Patrick Mahomes to get, a waiver wire quarterback that's, averaging out, as a QB3 in points per game, right? So there is some context that's necessary here. But this is what the strength of schedule looks like for all of these quarterbacks so far. And I want to give a special shout out to my Patreon members. Thank you to Big Hunt, SP, Mage Jack, Infamy MTG, AOYOB, and The Dawn. Without your support, this would not be possible. As you're probably well aware if you've been watching my videos for a while, I cannot get monetized because of the film breakdowns I do, and even just the little videos I have where I have clips of plays in them. They get demonetized every single time, making it, therefore, impossible to collect any revenue. So, obviously, your support is greatly appreciated. And if you are so inclined to become a member, the perks would be you will get access to a private Discord where we have both a real life and fantasy football chat, as well as a voice chat if you just don't want to have to type a bunch of stuff. I'll also give you detailed roster breakdowns and roster reviews where we talk about the strengths and weaknesses of your team. Then we kind of break it down further by looking into the scoring settings themselves and the starting lineup requirements to help you build the best team to help you dominate for years to come. In both Dynasty and then in Redraft, obviously, I'd help you with a good solid game plan, especially if you know where you're drafting from. Then also give you detailed trade advice based on your specific league settings to help you dominate. Also give you access to private live streams and the ability to not only see videos at least one day early, but also the ability to suggest videos that you would like to be created. So if you would like to support the channel, I would really appreciate it. If not, just please like and subscribe. Let's get back to the video. And finally, I have all of these factors grouped together, along with what, in my opinion only, is the potential move for you with said quarterbacks, right? Now, I tried to think of a couple of factors, such as, obviously, how they're performing, their strength of schedule for the fantasy playoffs, but then also kind of, general public opinion of said players and whether or not they might have really any trade value. And this is going to be league dependent. Some serious leagues, you can really sell just about anybody if somebody thinks that it's going to give them an advantage. In more casual leagues, you probably don't even have any trading going on. So you know your league significantly more than I ever will. So you'll need to add your own context of your specific league dynamic to at least my opinion and whatever your opinion is based on this video, right? But I have a couple of different categories. I have a serious buy, a buy, a hold / drop if better option available, a sell high if possible, or hold, and cut as well. So with Tua Tagovailoa, he's been a little bit streaky. He's definitely had a low floor and a high ceiling, but that strength of schedule is so ridiculous that I would make him a serious buy. Now, a buy could be, if he's already rostered, just adding him in as a nothing burger in a different trade that will get you what you want, or potentially just picking him up off the waiver wire. Once again, depending on your own specific league. I won't know if he's available or not. That'll just be up to you, right? Somebody like JJ McCarthy, somebody that he's had a little bit of a small sample size because, he had the ankle injury, but that is such a significantly easy strength of schedule that they have a chance to get rolling as an offense, and I think he is a serious buy or pickup. Dylan Gabriel, in bigger leagues, he might not be available, but that is also a significantly easy strength of schedule. I think he's a serious buy or pickup. Once again, depending on your bench size, how many quarterbacks you can have, so on and so forth. I think that owning one of the Commanders quarterbacks, whichever one you think ends up starting, if you can pick up Jaden Daniels, or if you have him, if he's on your IR, I think he is a very good hold until we get more information. I think both of the Commanders quarterbacks, based on their strength of schedule and upside any given week, are serious buys. Lamar Jackson, if you have him, I would not sell him under any condition really, unless you were just getting an absolute haul for a quarterback that's of relatively the same value, right? Because not only is he performing as a top 3 quarterback in points per game, he has the 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth best strength of schedule as well. So I think he's a serious buy if you can get him in trade as well. Jared Goff, somebody that's performing reasonably well, also has a very easy strength of schedule, basically identical to Lamar Jackson's. I think he's a similar buy. And I think that, Burrow, if he's available on your, in your redraft leagues, snatch him up now. And if you have Joe Flacco, potentially hold, cut, just depending on what the news is with Joe Burrow. He could potentially have a setback and not play for all we know, right? But I think the overall thought process should be we want one of the Bengals quarterbacks for sure on our roster. Now, Brock Purdy is somebody that I think is a soft buy or a less serious buy, just because he has significant injuries in the sense of he misses time quite often. The strength of schedule is definitely advantageous, and if you have him, I would definitely hold him or look to get him if you can get him for relatively cheap. Somebody like Daniel Jones is also performing relatively well. He has a pretty easy strength of schedule as well. I think he's a potential buy. Jordan Love, I have him as a hold because he hasn't really, I wouldn't go out of my way to buy him just because I don't think the upside on a per week basis is generally going to be super high. They like to run the ball quite a bit, and he just doesn't bring a lot of rushing upside. But I would probably hold him unless you can just get one of these guys that is a significantly better quarterback. Somebody like Drake May, I think, is a buy, even if you can get him, because he's been performing as a top quarterback, and he also has an above average strength of schedule in terms of positive good for us. Somebody like Jackson Dart, I think, is a solid hold. Now, I wouldn't look to drop Fields or Rodgers necessarily unless you have a better option. Bo Nix, Dak Prescott are both guys who have basically a net zero but slightly positive strength of schedule. I would be looking to hold those guys. Same with Caleb Williams, is relatively the same as well. Somebody like Trevor Lawrence, I would either hold him or drop if you have a better option because he's had some injuries to his own wide receiver core. The offense isn't particularly clicking, and it's a slightly below average strength of schedule. Somebody like Jalen Hurts is a top performer in points per game right now. He has a below average strength of schedule. I would call him a hold in general. I definitely wouldn't just drop him, obviously. No kidding. But I will say something with Jalen Hurts is he's missed a lot of time in the fantasy playoffs the last couple of seasons, either due to them resting Eagles players because they don't need to play. I don't think that'll be the case this year, but he also has had some injuries during the fantasy playoffs. So I would keep tabs on that and potentially pivot to somebody else that's an elite QB1, especially if you could somehow get barely anything added to get Lamar Jackson per se, who also, to be fair, has had his own share of injuries as well. So that is something to note about Lamar Jackson. But obviously, Hurts is in general going to be a top 5 redraft quarterback. Somebody like Sam Darnold at 16.5 points per game has a slightly disadvantageous strength of schedule. I think he's a drop or a hold. Drop if you have a better option, or hold. Somebody like Justin Herbert, I think, is a hold because I think he's talented enough to overcome generally strength of schedule. Somebody like Bryce Young, I think, is an absolute cut. He's a low-end performer. He has a pretty bad strength of schedule compared to most of the quarterbacks on this list. Michael Penix, I think, is a sell high if you can get anything for him. Now, sell high in your league may be nothing, so you may just want to cut him. That's fine too. Tyler Shuck has a pretty bad strength of schedule as well and hasn't been performing relatively well. I know he had a better game this past week, but I think he's a cut in general. Somebody like Josh Allen, he is pretty matchup proof. I will definitely give you that. I think he's a sell high if possible, or hold. And now by sell high, if I could get Lamar Jackson, who has a significantly easier playoff schedule, while also providing relatively close to the same points per game, I would do that. You might get a good plus on top. That's just, in my opinion, a smart way to think in this in fantasy football. But obviously, he is the best QB. And so if you want to hold him, then, obviously it won't be dumb. He's pretty matchup proof. I just think that would be one direction you could potentially go to where you could potentially get relatively the same production and then something serious potentially on top. Somebody like Matthew Stafford, 21.1 points per game, but he has a pretty bad strength of schedule. I think he fits in the same boat. Somebody like Baker Mayfield that's been a little bit inconsistent. He was off to an incredibly hot start, kind of floundered before the bye, then came back and had a decent game this week. Obviously, his playmakers were hurt, so it makes sense. But I do think that he's another guy that you could potentially sell high on to get somebody that's relatively the same and then get something else added. Somebody like Cam Ward, I don't think there's really any upside. There's no talent around him. I think he's an absolute cut. Somebody like CJ Stroud, I think is a sell high if you can get anything for him. You never know, because he was starting to kind of go off a couple weeks ago before this concussion. You may have missed the window if you were looking to cut or to sell high on him. But if not, potentially just hold him. Jacoby Brissett, I think, is a distinct sell high because that strength of schedule is starting to get to the point where it's going to be pretty brutal, and I don't think he's talented enough, and the offense in general and the coaching good enough to overcome brutal matchups. I think he is a true sell high, and I think you could get something decent for him in a redraft setting. Somebody like Geno Smith, absolute cut. He's bad. The offense is bad. It's a terrible strength of schedule. I would sell. And then Patrick Mahomes, somebody that obviously he's super talented. It looks like the old Chiefs offense where we have explosives everywhere. They're not just trying to run the ball and win 10-7, but he has significantly the most difficult strength of schedule of any player on this entire list. If you could move him for, a Lamar Jackson and a plus, a Drake May and a plus, and get, a minuscule, in the grand scheme of things, points per game difference, while also having an advantageous schedule, and then get something significant on top, I think that would be a fantastic idea. And yeah, those are some players that I think are potential buys, sells, holds, cuts based on the points per game that they've been giving us and the strength of schedule that they have. But once again, you know your league significantly more than I ever could, so you'll know whether some of these make sense for you or whether you'll really be able to take advantage of some of these, but I hope it helps you. And so, if you are going to be able to make the fantasy playoffs, I think some of these are pretty smart moves. If you're unable to, that is quite unfortunate. I know some injuries have been killing us lately this year. I lost, Hampton, Bucky, Neighbors, Benson, and others in one league, and I've had significant injuries in another league. So it's been pretty brutal, man. But yeah, I wish you guys the best. If you would like to, if you could subscribe to the Patreon, I would really appreciate it and give me some support. I'm unable to collect any revenue because I do film breakdowns on this and I can't become a YouTube partner because of that. But if you do not wish to or cannot, if you could just like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment below, that would be really helpful and help me in the algorithm. But yeah, I hope you guys have a good day, and I hope you smash your matchups this week, make the fantasy playoffs, and kill it in your fantasy championships and come home with that cash.